Hi, everybody. It's Katie Joe with Sovereign Soul Podcast, and I want to talk to you today a little bit about some of the clairs, CLAIR. So, a lot of people are familiar with the clair called clairvoyance, and this is the ability to see, clairvoy. Clairvoyance is to be able to see things that the normal human eye doesn't see. It could be ghosts, this could be angels, this could be the future, things like that. So, a lot of times, people who have strong clairvoyance are often perceived to be spiritual gurus or masters. But there's a lot more clairs, and not everyone's taught about these clairs. And because we're not taught about them, a lot of people have really, really, really strong spiritual gifts that they're not even aware are spiritual gifts. One of them is clairaudience. That means clear hearing. So a lot of times you'll have whispers or you're really sensitive to sound. And this is a sign of clairaudience. That means that you are tuning in to sounds and frequencies that the average person doesn't. Are you somebody who, as you're sitting and randomly hears that kind of buzzing or like that comes in out of nowhere and no one else in the room can hear that? That would be a sign that you are clairaudient. And if you recognize that you are naturally inclined to clairaudience, that is something that you can refine either through sound healing training or creating song lists or music lists or humming and chanting because you are already coded to that. As souls, we come down into physical bodies, and as we come into these bodies, we come with spiritual gifts. Everybody has them. They're all different. And while I'm going to share with you a few of the clairs that I know about, there's many, many, many more that I don't know about. So another one would be clair olfactory. That means fragrance. Have you ever been somewhere and you can smell or you can smell something that's not there? This happens a lot when, if you have a deceased grandparent, maybe he was a smoker and you're like, no one's here, no one in the house is smoking, but I get this sense of an old cigar. A lot of times that's a sign that through your gift, because our angels and guides will communicate with us through our gifts, that we're naturally able to receive messages. So your ancestor or the one with the message will try to give you a signal that they're nearby. So if you were to smell that you recognize as like a grandfather, grandmother scent, then I would invite you to kind of center into your heart and just ask the question, Grandpa, Grandma, are you here? Do you have a message for me? A lot of times with grandmothers, like it's their favorite perfumes or roses or something that they planted in their garden or something that they loved to cook. And our ancestors always are there to support us, even if they were not the best people in this physical realm. Often, when they move over to the other side of light, they are more aware and more clear. That doesn't always mean that you need to receive messages from them. In cases of abuse and things like that, you don't ever have to communicate with somebody who has done you harm. You always have the freedom and authority to say, look, I'm not open. I'm that's my boundary, because sometimes that can trigger you. But my point is with the clairs is that oftentimes angels, ancestors, they will show up with a fragrance if you're coded to be sensitive to smell. If you're sensitive to smell, meaning like you smell things other people don't smell, you're highly sensitive to stenches or mold or things like that that you smell. And most people in the world are like, that's not a big deal. It doesn't smell that bad. But you're like, it's awful. That would be a signal to you that you are spiritually inclined to be sensitive to smells. There's a lot of archangels, and even Mother Mary has been said to come in with the fragrance of roses, but many of them will have their own essence and fragrance because that's a communication language. Now, another way is claircognizance. Now, claircognizance would be that knowing. Man, I don't know how I know, I just know. I just know this person's lying. I can tell. I don't know how I can tell, but I can tell. I can, I just know this person's telling the truth. I don't know how I'm going to know, but I just know. Or I just know I should call this friend. I don't know why I know, but I know. So if you're having some of that, you might have really, 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 really strong clair cognizance, which means that you know, and you can't explain it, you just know. Now, another one is clair sentience. This means I feel, I feel, I feel. I can sense things. I can feel this. Have you ever walked into a room and said, something's up here? No one's in the room even, you're like, something happened here. And it could be positive or negative, but you can feel the emotions that are surrounding something. You can feel the emotions that are around other people. The word that's used a lot for clairsentience is empathy or empathetic. So if you're somebody that can feel things, like, then you probably are aware that there are angels, guides, gifts. You can feel when the energy of the room shifts. You can feel when things um, change. Now, I don't know the words, the other words, the what clair it is. Somebody in the video will know. But if you've ever felt something brush against you and it's nothing's there, that also is another spiritual gift. That means that you're hypersensitive to textures. Are you somebody that's sensitive to textures? Depending upon the clothes that you wear, the fabrics that you wear, things like that. If you're sensitive to that, your spiritual gift might be able to sense and feel different things. Now, a spiritual gift that has to do with touch is psychometry. Now, psychometry is when you can pick up something. In fact, I have a bowl here. You can pick up something, and I do know people who can do this, and you can actually understand where it's come from. You can actually see who owned it, see where the land it came from, or the process. So if you are sensitive to touch, fabric, feels, and things like, your spiritual gift might be psychometry. There's so many spiritual gifts out there. Clear taste. You might be able to say, man, I don't know why I'm walking down the street and I feel like I taste tin or I taste metal or, something like that. If you're really sensitive to taste, sometimes when spiritual guides are coming in, they're going to come in through taste, depending upon what their essence is, whatever food or fruit. I mean, Dionysus is known for wine, but there's others. Joseph of Arimathea was a tin trader, so you might be tasting tin if he's there to give you a guided message. So if you're very sensitive to taste, that also is a spiritual gift, because through the physical realm and the spiritual realm, they're interwoven, they're intertwined. And so that might be a gift. And so when we spend so much time and attention on clairvoyance and we think, oh, well, if I can't see ghosts, then I'm not gifted. That's not true at all. You might be more gifted than a clairvoyant, but because you don't understand or you're not recognizing your gift, you're discounting it. Now, I want to come back to clairvoyance, and here's why. Clairvoyance is one of the most dangerous spiritual gifts, and here's why. A lot of times we as people, we meet somebody who's very psychic and clairvoyant, and because they are so gifted in sight, we trust what they have to say, but we don't necessarily check to see if they are a good person. And also, just because you can see, it doesn't mean that you're receiving messages from the light. And so in the spiritual realm, there are light beings and there are dark beings, and there are those that create chaos and there are those that create order. And those that want to create chaos often will try to appear as a being of light or as an angel. So if you have a clairvoyant that's receiving imagery and receiving messages, and they are not developing their other clairs, then they're not somebody you can trust messages from, because the giver of the message may or may not be a safe messenger. So how can you know what is and isn't okay? So first, if you have a clairvoyant that you trust, pay attention. How do they live their life? Do they live in integrity with how they live? Do they say one thing and do another? Are they involving themselves in things that might be illegal, things that might be out of integrity, things that might not be safe? That would be another clue that you might not be able to trust their messages. I think that for clairvoyance, the most important thing is, have they developed their other gifts? Because I've been around a lot of psychics and clairvoyants. And in fact, I was in a situation one time where, because that's not my most dominant gift, I was with somebody who has a strong gift, and they were like, oh my gosh, I see this being here, and this is what they're telling us. And everything inside of me was feeling like something was off. because one of my greatest gifts is clairsentience and clairaudience. And I said, something is off. Everything feels wrong. And so a lot of times when you have a gifted clairvoyant, especially from childhood, they haven't always refined their other gifts. And because sight can easily be deceived, and they're not paying attention to this, the energy in the room, the feeling of the room, all of the other red lights that are going off that's saying, hold on, hold on, hold on. And they just kind of zero in on just a vision. For you or for them, it's always valuable to develop your other clairs, because even though we all have a dominant clair, we have the ability to develop all of them. And while we might always be coded to have a dominant clair, we can balance that out. And the more you develop the clair that you're in tune with, whether it's their olfactory, the smelling, the touching, the tasting, all of that, whatever it is that you refine, when you refine one, it actually helps to refine others. So if you are naturally inclined, for example, with clairvoyance, I invite you to tune into your feelings, tune into your hearing, tune into your smelling, your taste, your touch, and see if it all matches. So I trust and I hope that this is helpful for anybody with gifts, for anybody that wants to develop their gifts, or is listening to people who have them.